Five scores! Rick Vaughn.
We decided to get ourselves back in the game again with our podcast.
Rick Vaughn, Kerry.
Probably the craziest story that you're ever going to hear about hockey.
We're going to be coming back to you on a regular basis.
You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 60 of the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan Show. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs Fan. Joining me, as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Vibe. Squid, how are we keeping?
Not bad, Michael. Beautiful day here in Niagara Falls. Lousy round of golf this morning, unfortunately, but hey, I'm doing well.
That's good to hear. Well, Squid, our guest today, would enjoy a 34-year career as an NHL referee, calling 1,904 regular season games, 12 Stanley Cup Finals, 261 playoff games, World Cup of Hockey in 96, the 98 Winter Olympics in Nagano, Japan, was voted by the players as the most consistent official in the game, worked in broadcasting, and probably the best here in professional sports. Please welcome to the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan Show, Kerry Fraser. Kerry, how are we doing today?
Mike, I'm doing great. It's great to be back with my buddy Rick Vive. We played some charity golf events, and that smile on his face that we're looking at right now, I remember from the ice, especially when he scored 50 goals and I was standing on the goal line that night. I wasn't going to miss the opportunity to be in the picture, buddy. There is Fraser standing right there. And you know what? When Wayne Gretzky scored 50 in that 37 games,
39 games.
He got five goals, 39. He got 5 goals that night against the Philadelphia Flyers. The last one, open net, and we could feel it. You know, you could feel the energy, like he might be able to do this. And sure enough, goalie's out. Pete Peters is on the bench for the extra attacker, and Gretz gets the puck and he's in the neutral zone. I took off like a rocket trying to catch him, to be ahead of him and on the goal line so that I could be in the picture and point at the net when that puck went in. He shot it from too far out. I couldn't get there. I didn't make the picture, and I was on Rick Vive's 50 that ended up on the Leafs calendar, the cover of Leafs calendar that year. And that was the only time I would ever have an opportunity to be on a Leafs calendar.
Well, now, how are you spending your time otherwise for the last 18 months? So let's get through that first off.
We're doing great. Thank you. And I hope everybody has been safe that are listening. It's been just a crazy time for all of us all around the world. Kathy and I, the grandkids, we have 7 children and 12 grandkids, and most of them live close by us. The kids stayed away from us. We're older, compromised a little bit with health issues, but I'll tell you, I recognize that at my age and stage of life, I couldn't afford to miss a day, let alone a year. So I was out riding my road bike every day that it wasn't raining or snowing. I'd do 25 miles a day back in Blueberry Country in South New Jersey, where we're at. And my immune system was spiked up. I feel good. So we traveled 4 times during the pandemic to our favorite place in the world, which is Aruba. We tested negative all the time going in and coming out. And, we're living life, which I encourage people to do. You have to be smart, look after yourselves, but, just live life as best we can in the conditions that we're facing.
Now, before we get started, Kerry, I want you to give me the skinny on my co-host. Did he try to, let's get it out of the way right now, did he try to sneak infractions by you, or were you wise to him, or was he just not quick enough to slip a slash, hook, or trip by you?
Well, he was a captain, and I always tried to communicate well with captains. Squid, honestly, was a guy that I could communicate with. And, he's going to try and take a break when he can. And he'd try to convince me, when he thought I needed a little tune-up. But he was a great player. He was a sniper. But he was also a guy that went into the hard areas of the game back in those times. And when we start talking about cross-checking, I have a story from a game when Rick was playing in Buffalo that is firmly etched in my memory banks, and I'll never forget it. And cross-checking is something, he didn't wear that horse collar to keep his neck warm. There was a reason for that. He had neck issues, and it was resulting from going into those hard places. And we, as refs, were allowing way too much heavy lumber, as they are now.
Well, I enjoyed going there, to be honest with you. I mean, it was. If you're going to score goals, sometimes you got to go and you got to take a little bit of a licking to get a rebound or a tip in or something. But I thought there was probably a little bit too much cross-checking going on back, even in our day, even though the game was kind of played that way. But I mean, like just standing there and getting cross-check after cross-check after cross-check. And I remember one time I was playing for Buffalo. We were playing Montreal. It was a playoff game. And I'm in front of the net in the power play. I got Ludwig on one side and Chelios on the other. And when the puck was over here, Chelios would come in, and all it would just keep going like this, one after another. And then when the puck went over here, Ludwig could come in and do the same. Meanwhile, Patrick Waugh is whacking me on the leg with his goalie stick. And I forget who, I don't know who was doing the game. I know it wasn't Kerry.
Must have been Paul Stewart. Must have been Paul Stewart.
No, it was one of the older guys.
Could have been Paul Stewart.
No, it was one of the older guys. It might have been Hoagie or Bruce Hood or one of those guys. Anyway, he just looked at me and went, no. Well, what's he got to do, for Christ's sakes? Like, does he got to chop my arm off before he gets a penalty or what? But you know what? It was.
I got it. I have to share with you this particular game and Rick was a tough guy, and he went there and he took it, and he scored a lot of goals from in that spot. But this particular one, I'll never forget. And I called a 2-minute cross-checking penalty on the play. It was an extension, full extension, and it got him up high, and Rick went down. And he's a tough guy. But when I came to him, and he was sort of in the fetal position, and I don't say this disrespectfully, I say it because he's tough. He was actually, I could hear him whimpering. It hurt so much. It wasn't a cry, but it was he was trying to recover from it. And he played hurt. He was playing hurt that night, as you always did. If bone wasn't through the skin, you kept going. So when you look at, fans don't realize the pain and suffering that was administered. I will tell you that Chris Pronger, for me, was the one guy that I had to educate the most, because when he was playing for the St. Louis Blues, big, strong guy, and when they got a penalty and he came on to kill that penalty, he thought that anything would go. He didn't think a second penalty would happen until I continually gave second penalties for that boom, full extension cross-check. Finally, he got it. He recognized, and I said, I don't know what happens other nights, but I'm going to tell you, I don't care if you've got 2, 3, 4, or 5 guys sitting in the penalty box. When you deliver that kind of blow to a man from the back, you're going to get a penalty. And, we finally had a meeting of the minds. I go back to training camp. I just finished playing junior A hockey in Ontario. I go to a referee school, scouted, boom. 2 days later, I'm at the NHL training camp for officials. I knew enough as a player and a rookie to keep my mouth shut and my ears open. I'm going to learn a lot. So we were doing a rules session, and I'm sitting beside Lloyd Gilmore, who didn't call a whole lot, and he did that Russian game in Philly when the Russians left the ice. It was prison rules. And so I sit beside Lloyd, and they're talking about spearing. And we had a 2-minute penalty or a 5-minute penalty for spearing based on the judgment of the referee. So I said to Mr. Gilmore, I said, excuse me, Lloyd, what's the difference between a 2-minute spearing penalty or a 5-minute spearing penalty? He said, well, kid, if you see the stick go in through the front and it doesn't come out the back, it's 2 minutes. If it comes out the back, it's 5. There you go.
Now, Kerry, let me ask you this. Would you chat with captains if there's a history between two teams from a recent encounter that got out of hand, maybe as a reminder that you weren't going to put up with any nonsense?
Absolutely, Mike. I'll tell you, I was put into games, reassigned on short order. One was the Leafs and Ottawa when Alfie threw the stick in the crowd, and there was all kinds of nonsense going on. I was pulled into that game. I was supposed to be working in Colorado. I was immediately reassigned to go to Ottawa. They knew that, and it was McCreary and I. And he had been assigned to the game. I was brought into the game. So I'm dropping the puck as a senior ref, and they knew that we had the game face on. There was no nonsense going to happen, and there was no friendly. Oftentimes I'd come onto the ice, hey, how you doing? How's this? How's that? This was all business, and they knew it. And we had 3 penalties right off the bat, bang, 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 and it was a cakewalk from then on in. They knew that it wasn't going to happen on our watch.
So, Squid, as you as the captain, would you go and speak to a referee before a game that you knew there could get maybe out of hand and see how the ref's mood was, or maybe how he was feeling that night with you guys playing?
Well, most of them would come to us actually and talk about it, and just say, "Hey, listen, we know what happened the last time you guys met, and we don't want a reoccurrence of that. So we'd appreciate it if you'd go back to your benches and tell your coaches and so on." And there was the one thing that I'll say is that back when I played anyway, the officials were great. Their communication on the ice was fantastic. I mean, I might have said some, that was a bullshit call sometimes, or and maybe a little more animated than that. But at the end of the day, they would come over and they would talk to you, and so you got a clear answer, and maybe it wasn't always the answer you wanted to hear, but yet it was a conversation, and I thought that was great. I mean, and then there was a period there of I don't know how many years where the referees would just like put their hands up and say, just get away. And then now I see them starting to communicate a little bit more because it's a younger generation probably, and they need to be talked to, I think, probably throughout the game.
Boys,
go ahead, Kerry.
Mike, if I may, I had a rare weekend off one time, and the Hartford Whalers played in Boston the night before. It's a Sunday morning. I get a call from director of officiating. I love the man, John McCauley. Next said, "Kerry, I'm sorry to have to do this to you. You got a weekend off, won a season," but he said, "I got to send you to Hartford." I had a call last night, he said, from the owners of both teams, the general managers of both teams, and the coaches of both teams. It was World War III, and they've got the rematch tonight back in Hartford. I got to send you in. I get on a flight, boom, I show up. I stepped onto the ice, and as the teams came on for the national anthem, I had Captain Ray Bork and Randy Ladisseur come to me, converge on me at the same time. And they both said, "Oh my God, thank God you're here." They said, "Last night we were afraid somebody was going to get murdered." And so those two teams had already talked about like, "Ooh, we're a little nervous here." And then I said, "Okay, boys, I'll let you play us, but you know where the line is, and I'm going to lay the hammer down if I have to. Let's get her on good stead when I drop the puck." And that's what happened. It just, some nights, Rick, when you've had a battle the night before, there's not much left in the tank. You just want to play. And especially when they said, "We thought somebody was literally going to get killed."
Well, I was going to say to you now, what about enforcers, Kerry? Everyone in the building knows something's going to occur at some point during the contest. You're not dumb. You know it's going to happen. Did you have to remind these guys, "Boys, do your job. Don't embarrass me and make a mockery of this, though"?
You know what? I loved developing. Rick hit the nail on the head. Developing relationships was the most successful, and I think one of the reasons I lasted as long as I did. I worked hard at developing relationships with the players, and the tough guys on the team are the ones that were the most respected by their teammates. The only guy I didn't really get along, Knuckles Nyland, he hated me. But now we're besties. We do a radio show on TSN every Tuesday during the season. But I will tell you, Tiger Williams, for example, I saw Tiger in the Western League, before I came up to the NHL. And one night in Maple Leaf Gardens, he brought his elbow up a little bit. I said, "Listen, Tig, you got that elbow up pretty high." I said, "Listen, buddy, you got to get, or I'm going to have to give you one. I give you a break there. He said, oh, thanks, Fraser. Now, the very next shift, I'm with him in the corner, and he's battling a guy. The puck moves up the wall, and it's going to go out in the neutral zone, and I did a hit. I entrapped him. I turned to go up, follow the play, snapped my head back, right as he's elbowing the guy right in the ear. Boom, up went my hand. I said, Tiger, I warned you. He said, I know, Fraser. He said, my bad. And he went to the penalty box. So those are the guys, when the blank hits the fan, you could go to somebody that the team respected and say, hey, help me out here. Let's bring it down a little bit. When guys fight, and now we know too many hits to the head isn't good for anybody, okay? Back then, there were times where I felt that the game needed a fight to bring it down. And there were times when I even promoted one. You won't believe it, but I did.
Yeah.
I would say, when the linesman would get in and everybody's yap, and they're tough guys, and I'd say, hey, you want to go? And because I'll get the linesman out of here. Typically, they were embarrassed and they had to go, but there were some guys that started back and tracking pretty quick because they did not want to fight. And those three most feared words that a referee can ever utter, let them go.
Squid, can you add to that?
No, it's like, I mean, that's the thing about, they looked after the game really well back then. I mean, it was kind of like they were the guardians of the game, so to speak, when it was on the ice. And I thought they did a great job of, whether they needed to settle things down or, like Kerry said, like, okay, some nights, hey, you guys you want to go? Okay, go ahead. I'll get the linesman out of here. Like, just simple little things like that. I think go a long way, or went a long way in my day anyway, to keep the game professional, I guess, would probably be the best word I could use.
Well, Kerry, before we get into your career, let's go through this year's playoffs. First, right off the bat, your thoughts on the officiating.
They really took a beating by the media, the worst I've ever seen. And we have to understand the situation with COVID, with referees being assigned strictly in Canada, players playing in a Canadian division and the U.S. division. So that sort of made it difficult to have a rotation of officials that you bring into a series and bring out your top guys as well as the lower rated guys. So that made it difficult to begin with. And then they had to stay in a series for too long. And overexposure can be a real problem. We know that in a playoff series, through all the playoffs that I did and the finals, game one is a feel out sometimes. Game two, if the visiting team wins, the pressure's on the home team to win. But as that series prolongs and we get to games 4, maybe a deciding game 5 is wicked because somebody's on the bubble tip. And so they look for excuses. And, the referees and the linesmen can be the biggest excuse for a loss. And there's games played within the game where a general manager, a coach will get the series supervisor, get in his ear and berate the officials and say, face-offs, for example. Patrice Bergeron, he's one of the best face-off guys. So the objective there would be to get that coach or opposing general manager to up the series supervisor and say, look at him, he's cheating. You can't possibly win 65% of your faceoffs. And so now the seed is planted. It goes to the linesman's ear in a meeting, just even subliminal. Make sure that he puts his stick down. Make sure he does it right. And I saw Patrice Bergeron throwing out a lot of faceoffs this playoffs that never happened before.
I was going to ask you.
I thought, you know what?
Go ahead, Squid.
Sorry, I got to agree with you there, Kerry. I think they took a lot of heat when I don't think it was warranted. I mean, you know what? I think they referee just like they do every other year, whereas the regular season is one way. The first round is a little bit tougher, but when you get to the Stanley Cup Finals, I mean, you don't want to be the guy who decides the outcome of the game. And I understand that 100%. It was the way they were in my day. It's the way they refereed this year. And I didn't think they did a very bad job at all. I'll be honest.
Well, I was going to say,
there-
so one, Kerry, Kerry, the one thing you can pick up on off of this is that, just continue on your thought, was the number of cross-checks. Now, you touched on that earlier with Squid and some of the guys. More people we talked to, we had Rick talking on, a couple of the guys we've had on earlier made comments about that. It seemed to get worse the more the players got away with it, obviously. What were your thoughts on that? I mean, that really stood out this year. And maybe pick up on this part, the part about that from what people are questioning about officials this year from fans and even players, and I'm sure you hear this endlessly, why the two sets of rules? Why in a regular season, all these things are called, in the playoffs all of a sudden, they let it go. And the thinking is, from my standpoint, is I enjoy it either way, but the point is isn't that almost slowing the skilled players, counterproductive for the NHL when they should be showcasing the elite talent of the league?
Mike, I'm on your page, and you know,
Well, this is hold on. This isn't Disney on Ice here, Mike. It's the Stanley Cup Finals, for Christ's sake.
I said I like it.
I don't give a
but
I don't give a shit if we shut down the skilled guys. I mean, that's what you need to do to win.
Clean.
It was fairly clean. Montreal got called a ton of times for cross-checking, and their penalty kill was really good. So, I mean, you know,
I'll give you that one, Rick.
Happens.
Their penalty kill was excellent. Montreal's kill was awesome.
Well, they got a lot of practice.
But here's what. Yeah, they did. But here's what. I don't think the referees were very good, sadly. And the reason I say that is the video replay doesn't lie. And in the Montreal Las Vegas series, there was egregious infractions that were allowed to go unpenalized, and cameras don't lie, and the referee would be looking right at it and then would turn his head away, didn't want to see it. That one was highly publicized. So when the inmates run the prison, then the ref, it's an awful position to be in. We've all been there, where you've let this one go, and now, to be fair, you have to let one go the other way. It's always worse than the one that you let go previously, and the snowball starts to roll down the hill, and then the ref is boxed in. What do you call? How do you bring the reins back on that horse? It's it's out of the barn and it's going. So ultimately now it's a puck over the glass or some automatic penalty, but it's really a tough situation to be in. I think that the game should be played with the same rules from the regular season to the Stanley Cup playoffs. I know that there's more at stake. I know the pressure on the refs, but they need to be supported for making those tough calls. And I'm not talking ticky-tacky stuff. We were seeing stuff that was like the heavy cross checks, the hits from behind, that I was like, wow, that when I go like that, you know, that's my reaction, that this is beyond a 2-minute penalty. And oftentimes they weren't called. But yet then there would be something like a little stick slash or something like that, and it would be called. There's not a balance at that point. And the players, like Rick, would recognize that. They know that they can get away with certain things, and they will. Because Macaulay told me years ago, he said, Kerry, the biggest deterrent for a player not to commit an infraction is the fear that the referee will call it. We love the intensity of the game. We love to play on the edge. And I always tried to let them play on the edge. But once they cross it, they had to know that when I was out there, I had a line. And if they crossed that line, I'd let them go to the line and be fair. But you go over it and you have to be penalized. I didn't commit the infraction. They did. Why do we as referees feel guilty for controlling the outcome of the game when, in fact, we let an infraction go, we're perhaps having an effect on the outcome of the game? Why are we there?
Yeah. Well, I think the word we're looking for is consistency, and I think you just touched on it. That would be the perfect world. But again, when the stakes get higher, it's pretty tough. Wouldn't you agree?
But Mike, they have to be supported, buddy.
I agree.
When a referee makes that ballsy call, that tough one that, you know, I made calls and disallowed goals that I knew I would be dead right. in the Alain Côté disallowed goal in the Battle of Quebec in Game 5 in 1987. I saw that play materialize, and Paul Gillis dragged Hayward out of the net with his skate and a stick, and Matt Snedlin was on his back, and it was an open net. And I'm seeing Côté cut into the middle, and I am in my head going, "Oh, please don't score," because I know that I have to disallow that goal. I wouldn't be able to look myself in the mirror if I didn't disallow that. Sure enough, they're celebrating, and I'm coming into camera waving it off. Now, what would happen? That was with a minute and a half left in a tie game, Game 5, Stanley Cup playoff, Battle of Quebec, which nothing is more intense than that ever. And I'm disallowing that goal that would have been the winner. And what happens? Michel Bergeron's up on the bench. He's pulling his hair out, and they never actually got back into it. They were in shock. Next face-off, Carbonneau wins the draw. Down they go. Kurt Muller over to Ryan Walter. Zoom in the net. Game-winning goal. I never worked another playoff game that year. I got dropped like a hot potato.
Kerry,
and you were right, though.
But
I was dead right.
Okay, Kerry, today, when you look at like the war room they have and everything, and so many challenges and offsides and going, and all that kind of stuff, the goals being called off and always being reviewed. Like, I don't know, I have a hard time with that, because I think there should be a little bit of a human error. Yes, I want to see the call get called properly, but there's got to be a little bit of a human error in the game. I mean, unless one day they have robots doing it and they get everything exactly perfectly right. But right now it's not that way. And all these challenges, I don't know. Personally, that's just my opinion.
Well, I'll tell you, Rick, I welcomed the video replay when we brought it in '98, and the reason being is I wanted it to prove that we were right 99% of the time. But on the odd occasion when we weren't right, and especially on the scoring of goals, which decides the outcome of the game, I wanted us to be perfect. So I'm okay with that. But here's what, and you mentioned the Situation Room in Toronto. Great guys. All knowledgeable hockey men. But I'll tell you, you and I, Rick, may differ on what should be allowed in going to the net, goalie interference. You were taught to crash the net, go hard to the net. Do as much as you could to obstruct the goalie, whether it's physically or visually, and that's how you were taught to play the game, and it resulted in a lot of goals being scored. I, on the other hand, know the difference between what a player is coached to do and what he is allowed to do within the playing rules. That's my job. So we could have a discussion, or you and I could be sitting in the Situation Room. You might say, well, that's a good goal. And I might say, no, Rick, it's not. And here's why, from a rules perspective. And so I think there needs to be more officiating knowledge in that room. And I think when we looked at, I was ordering a pizza there. When you go back to a couple of years ago in the playoffs, with the hand pass, Jumbo Joe Thornton playing for San Jose, and the game's in St. Louis in overtime, and it's a hand pass winning goal, and everybody's up in arms about it. But that was a call that had to be made within the rules by the officials on the ice. The Situation Room couldn't call in and say, hey, whoa, you got a hand pass. It's not allowed. There's certain conditions which they could rule upon. Here's what I suggest. You have a standby backup referee assigned to the crew in every playoff game. Let's not have him just sit in the dressing room with his gear on short of his skates waiting if he gets called into action. Let's have him functional. He's an official. He'd have to step on the ice and referee that game if somebody got hurt. So let's use him in the rink. And he could have said, it's a referee's call. I'm the backup referee. I'm assigned to the crew. That was a hand pass. He'd get on the blower. He'd call guys on the ice, say, boys, I just reviewed it. I'm saying it's a hand pass. It is no goal. And that referee made that call. He's part of the crew. Why not do that?
That's a good thought. Well,
This is a very good thought. I mean,
but here's my overall view on that, Kerry. Is I'm thinking, do you think the war room? We know what it's there for. We know what it's used for. But also from the referees' perspectives, it's another set of. They got enough set of eyes on them already. They're looking for the consistency. But as a referee, though, now you got more people watching you. I mean, think about this. You're getting your calls reviewed, and listen, officials are only human. If your number shows up 3 times more reviewed than the other guy, at some point your bosses are going to take notice. I mean, these guys can't be all bad luck that his calls are always being reviewed because they've been wrong. Does this put more pressure on a ref, you think?
Mike, there's 2 things here that I'm going to share with you. First of all, I agree that the referees today are relying on the eye in the sky too much. They don't want to make the call. I wanted to see everything. I wanted to make the call. Obviously, we're human. We don't see everything. God knows that happened. But if you try your best to be in the right position at the right time to make that call and then have video review, confirm it for you, that's a win-win. That's awesome. But I had a game in New York in Madison Square Garden. And sometimes in the 2-referee system, things just happen to occur in your wheelhouse, in your zone or area of coverage. And the first 4 penalties that night in the first period were like 15 feet from me in my wheelhouse. My arm went up to call a delayed penalty. My partner 100 feet away. When my arm went up, his arm went up. Now, when both referees have their arms up, you're supposed to confer to make sure you have the same penalty before you go to announce it at the timekeeper's bench. Not this night. 4 times in a row, this guy blasted off, flipped on his mic, announced the penalty. I'm thinking, what the heck is this all about? Now, the 5th one, with about 2 minutes left in the first period, I'm the back ref and I'm following the play, and the other guy's leading the play, and the puck carrier is over in his wheelhouse, and he's looking right at it. And there's a water ski, a holdup on the off wing. Up goes my arm. My arm's up 8 seconds, 9 seconds. All of a sudden, on the delay in the end zone, the other guy puts his arm up. And I'm standing beside linesman Pat DiPuzzo on the blue line. I said, "Oh my God, Pat, have we got a second penalty?" Like, I didn't see anything. He said, "I don't know either, Fraser." I stopped play with the change of possession. Now, this guy, for 4 times in a row, went to the penalty box, flipped on his mic, and announced it. This is the first time he skated over to me. He said, "What do you got?" I knew he didn't see it, right? I said, "What have I got? What have you got?" He went, I said, "Yeah, you didn't see it." And so I went over and announced the penalty period ends. I said, "What the hell are you doing? Like, what is going on here?" He said, "Well, I got a friend that's on the off-ice crew in Montreal, and he got a directive from hockey operations, and they're now recording which referee calls the penalties." I was 0 for 4.
Well, here, Kerry, I want to get into a couple. Hey, I want to get into a couple of your relation. You talk about relationships. Let's talk about some of the little more serious ones now. Some of the battles you've had over the years, and some of the good ones you've had. One story in your book, and people, if you hadn't read Kerry's book, read it. It's a must read. It's a terrific account of his career and about life in NHL. It's terrific. Theo Fleury.
Yeah.
You tell a very interesting story in the book about him doing a complete 180 as a player after almost threatening to murder you one night.
Yeah.
And coming back to you. And I thought that was a very telling story for your role as a referee and official.
Well, Mike, we all put our pants on the same way, and we have to have compassion for our neighbors and our friends. And the hockey community is no exception. All great people. We battle one another on the ice, but when it's over typically. Not with Theo, though. Theo had his own issues. We know that now, but we didn't know it back then. And so in 1996, and I was the guy, he hated, anybody in sort of an authoritative figure. I was about his same size, and I was his target more than anyone. And maybe it was my ego that he thought, whatever. And so this one particular game in the Stanley Cup playoffs in 1996, he's playing for Calgary. It's in Chicago. He took 2 penalties. The second one, he went ballistic. He cursed at me like in the most foul profane language you could ever think of. And he wrote it in his book, Playing with Fire, and it was exactly what he said to me that night. He challenged me to a fight in the parking lot. He took his helmet off. He threw it at me. It hit my right skate. The adrenaline's flowing, my legs twitching, the muscles I wanted to kick that thing back in his face. I just calm, took a breath, threw him out of the game. Now, 4 years later, we fast-tracked to 2000, December 19th of 2000, and he had signed a free agency contract with the New York Rangers for $8 million, a one-year deal. They didn't put him in the league right off the bat. He was put in the league substance abuse program. St. Louis Blues are playing that night. Joel Quenneville is the coach, and Tyson Nash, at the end of the first period, there's a scrum down in the corner, and Tyson Nash is involved with Theo. The play disbands, the players leave the ice, and it's just Theo and I standing at the red line between the two benches at Madison Square Garden. And this little mighty mouse that had, challenged me to a fight and thrown his helmet at me came to me with tears in his eyes. And he said, Kerry, I'm trying to clean up my life, honest. I haven't done, and he mentioned a drug, in X number of months. I haven't had a drink in X number of months. I'm trying to clean my life up. Don't let him talk to me like that. And I said, who and what? Now, human nature might dictate. I could have said, you know what? It looks good on you. How do you like it? Yeah. You remember back in, I saw this wounded human being in front of me, and I just wanted to take his pain away. It looked like one of my kids. I wanted to just make him feel better. So I quickly thought, and I said, if I can get Tyson Nash back here at the start of the next period, right on this spot, and he gives you a sincere apology, will you accept it like a man? He said, yeah, I will. I said, before we departed, I said, now promise me if I get him here, you won't break your stick over his head. He said, I promise. So I go right into I pass our dressing room, and Rick knows where the visiting team coach's room is. And I go in there and I say, Joel, this is what your player, Tyson Nash, said to Theo Fleury. Joel is a class act. He rolled his eyes. He said, do you want me to tell him to take his gear off? He thought I was going to throw him out of the game. I said, no, how about this? Apology. Be good for Theo, and it might not even hurt your guy. He said, great idea. And he ran out of the coach's room right into his dressing room, player's room. I'm standing with Theo. St. Louis Blues come out of the Zamboni entrance at MSG, and Tyson looked like he was going to do a skate pass. I flagged him over. I said, do you have something to say to this man? Tyson was affected by this. His lip was quivering. He looked Theo right in the eye. He said, Theo, I am sincerely sorry. I went way below the line for what I said. And he said, I wish you all the best that you've got ahead of you. And he tapped him on the shin pad with his stick. I went, you good with that, Theo? He said, yeah, I'm good with that. I said, boys, shake hands. Let's play. Well, Tyson Nash did what he typically does. He was leading the league in drawn penalties. He had the loose helmet, the long hair, and he'd flip his head back. Somebody touch him, and he'd draw a penalty. He'd take a dive, and he did his job that night. And he got Brown on defense for the Rangers so mad he jumped him and fought him, and he got extra penalty minutes, and the St. Louis Blues won the game. Now, 10 years later passed, guys. 2010, I retire. I'm sitting down, and I'm writing my book, and I reveal those comments about that situation with Chicago. And I went, man, I always want to take a bad situation and try and make it good. So I called Tyson Nash. I said, hey, Tyson, Kerry here. I'd like your permission to share a story. Do you remember the situation with Theo Fleury in Madison Square Garden, December 19, 2000? Guys, the phone went quiet. It was dead airspace. He went, Kerry, that was a life-altering situation for me. It was career-changing. I said, talk to me, tell me about it. And he wrote in his own words, I put it in the book, in his own words, what that situation meant to him. And it was a wake-up call for him. And I got to tell you, Theo and Tyson and I, whenever we're asked to speak somewhere, even to this day, that story comes up, and they share it from their perspective, and I share it from mine. Here's the message, gang. We never know how we can affect someone in a positive way. Something simple. This was simple, an apology. So we all have that power. And I'm not just talking players and coaches. I'm talking about your viewers. Yeah. You can make a difference in the life of somebody. Just do something nice, something simple. We're all here together.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's anything better than helping someone. You know, it's such a, and it doesn't take that much sometimes. It's just a conversation with someone, and you know, I mean, it warms my heart when I hear those types of stories, and I love to do that myself, to be quite honest with you. I mean, I've been through my own battles and come out the other side, and if there's anything I can do to help anybody else, but I've had many calls from ex-NHLers who are having issues, and I've talked to them and kind of got them to go to rehab, and a lot of them have come out the other side stronger than when they went in. And you know, to me, that makes me feel pretty darn good that I'm able to help someone. And
well, somebody
you know,
must have
why
helped
wouldn't
you.
you?
Yeah. Somebody must have helped you along the way, you know?
I got to the point where it was pretty dire, and I actually decided I made that decision myself. And yeah, people did help me when I got there, and you know, throughout the whole process. But I made that very difficult decision that, you know what, if I don't go, then you know I'm going to lose my family. I'm going to lose everything. And that was the last thing I said to me. I can't let that happen. And I booked it, and away I went. So
God bless you.
I mean,
you're an inspiration.
It's
now, Kerry, away
well,
from that, let's go to the opposite way. Let's go to some of the coaches. Now, you've had some famous battles with coaches over the years, no question. There's not a referee alive that hasn't. But Pat Quinn, I know, comes to mind immediately. So how about Pat Quinn? And we got to get this name in because it shows up every show or every other show, Squid. Mike Keenan. There's got to be a Mike Keenan story in there too.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Pat Quinn and Brian Burke told me when he was the assistant GM at Vancouver, he said, Kerry, don't take it personally. Pat hates all referees. He thinks you're all out to screw him. Well, so I had a game, and he's coaching the Leafs, and it's a Saturday night, hockey night in Canada game, Montreal. And I was late. I took a young man that I met at the Marriott, Sir Savarge's Marriott there, in a wheelchair, and he was from London, Ontario, and I wanted to know who his favorite goalie was, and he mentioned it, and I said, well, would you like to go to the morning skate? So I took him over, so I got back for lunch late. And it's just me sitting in the restaurant at the Marriott, and Pat Quinn came in late with the paper under his arm. And Benito, the maitre d', is going to sit him down. The place is empty. Puts him right down at the table beside me. And Pat looks at Benito. He says, Benito, he said, the whole GD place is empty, and you're going to sit me down at the table beside the GD referee for the game tonight? I thought he was joking. But he wasn't. It was uncomfortable as heck. So he's reading his paper, and I knew that his daughter was applying for citizenship, and we were in process at the same time, my family, for dual citizenship, U.S. naturalization. So and Pat being a lawyer, I said, hey, Pat, your daughter, I understand, is going through the immigration thing. Can I ask you a couple of questions? So we had a conversation, just like Rick said. It's about relationship. It's just a little conversation. So it was friendly, and he gave me some good advice, and I thanked him. Now the Leafs win the game that night, 1-0, and I see him walking across. He's got the big smile and the jowls, and he's walking across the ice. And I skated up to him before I left. I said, "Hey, Pat, see, all you had to do was have lunch with the GD referee." He said, "If I had known that's how easy it was, I would have done it long ago." And then now he's in his final season and my final season. He's in Edmonton, right? And he's ripping my young referee, and he's just screaming at him. And I skated over to the bench, and I said, "Pat, I am so happy that you came out of retirement knowing it was my final season." And he started to laugh, and the all started going. And I'll tell you, my very final game in Edmonton, I went into the coach's room, and I had a beer with Pat and his staff, and we had a conversation. Hockey guys, buried the hatchet, and it was terrific. I had so much respect for him. He did so much in the game, and he was loyal to his players, man. I'll tell you, and Rick could probably agree with me there. But Mike Keenan, You know, Iron Mike, I got along with great. We moved down from Sarnia, Ontario, 1988. His house was on the market. He was a motivated seller. He got fired by the Flyers, and he's off in Chicago. He needed to get rid of this house, and I bought it. So years went by. He went from Chicago. He won the cup with the Rangers. Then he went to St. Louis for a short period. Then he was in Boston, and we're now in the 2-referee system in Boston. And again, he's ripping my young referee partner, screaming and yelling at him. And I'm back to ref, and I have to go over and do the line change. So I wanted to get him off the kid. So I went over and I looked him right in the face, and I pointed my finger at him. I said, "Mike, that effing house you sold me, the roof's leaking." Well, all the players started laughing. Without a word of a lie, Keenan backed up. His eyes got big. He said, "Kerry, honest, I thought I got it fixed." 2 weeks later, we had a big rainstorm in New Jersey. I had 3 fireplaces, and water was pouring down the chimney. So I went up on the roof, and he had all this black tar around the flashing. It just shrunk over time, and he got me.
That's it. Well, we're getting into our last time. We had so much we want to get through with you. And I want to get into the Olympics, Kerry, the Olympic experience. Now, I'll fast forward a little bit here. First off, going to the NHL, you're a Leaf fan growing up. It's easy to divest yourself from the Maple Leafs doing your job. People do that. Maybe Leaf fans don't believe that, but you do. Now, going to the world stage, your country's playing, you're refereeing the game. How difficult was that to separate your focus as a referee, especially with not just a local fan base watching? You got all of Canada. And if you recall, you'll know this name, Tom Brown, the 74 Russia WHA series, a couple bad calls, his career was ruined.
Well, Mike, I have to tell you that my objective as a referee was to do my very best to be the best that I could for the players, for the coaches, for the game that I loved, and for the fans. So there was no bias. It was jersey. They were jerseys. It didn't matter. They were numbers. They were mostly all NHL players anyway that I had relationships with, no matter what country they were from. I wanted to make a positive difference every time I stepped on the ice. I wanted to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. That was my objective. So when the biggest thing that I had to deal with was that I had to wear a helmet and a visor. I mean, he covered up the national treasure, but nonetheless, it was like I was in a fishbowl trying to navigate. And it's funny because Craig McTavish and Gretz and I had a conversation one time. Wayne wore that little jofa that protected him. And each of us felt that we had a heightened sense of awareness when we weren't protected. And honest to goodness, I could slip puck. It was like radar. And I was actually trying on a vest one time that a guy at a Strathroy made, a flak jacket. And he told me if you get hit in the chest, it'll disperse the energy. I had a game in Boston, and I'm leading the play in the zone, and Sean O'Donnell on a power play for the Bruins pounds one cross ice, going about 95 miles an hour. He was going to do a cross ice around, and I see it coming. And this is perfect. I'm going to square. I'm going to take this one in the chest and see if this thing really works. So I squared up, and now, and it's 95 miles an hour, and I'm seeing things slowly. It just comes slow, and all of a sudden it's starting to rise, and I go up. Nope, it's not going to work. Boom! I hit the deck, and I actually felt it brush my hair. And the Bruins play-by-play guy goes, and down goes Fraser, and Gordy Kluzak is the play-by-play guy or color guy. He says, and not a hair out of place. But that's how we see things. Honest to goodness, you see things coming slow. And I've seen players, if I've slipped the puck, I've seen them just shoot right in the face. I cut 3 times deflected pucks. All those years I never wore a helmet. The year they made me wear a helmet in my final collective bargaining, the first game I got hit with sticks in the corner 5 times. Because I was protected.
Kerry, you obviously did a lot of Stanley Cup final games. I know it's a little bit different but I mean, the players all have a routine. They have ways of getting themselves up for the game and that sort of thing. Take us through a normal day for a referee in the National Hockey League in the Stanley Cup Finals. Exactly what you would do, or what most guys probably do.
Sure. Well, I have to tell you, Rick, what I always tried to be was emotionally neutral. I never wanted to be too high. I never wanted to be too low. I tried to stay emotionally in a good state. So the day before, I'd like to get to the rink or to the game early. Kelly Sutherland is just a terrific young referee, now a veteran. But so he would adhere to this kind of philosophy. You have to be calm. You can't go in emotionally charged. So my routine would be night before, have an early dinner, good night's sleep, relaxed. I might read. I don't want to read the newspapers. I don't want to watch the sports news. I don't want to have any influence. I just want to be neutral. And so the next morning, it's up, ride the bike, go to the health club. We typically stayed at Marriott's. We would have a meeting at 12 noon with the series supervisor and the officials and the backup crew. We would have discussions about what happened in the previous games, who might be matched up. Oftentimes, when you get to the finals, you've watched it anyway. You've seen the other game. You might have been the backup. But again, each game, as you know, Rick, is different. Players will play differently. There's going to you can be prepared with matchups and things of that sort. But when I dropped that puck, I just wanted to turn it over to the players. I wanted the game like a flower to unfold for me. I had to be ready. If there was an infraction that occurred right off the bat, I needed to be mentally prepared for it. And here's how I did that. During the national anthem, and I've already seen all the players come out prior to the national anthem, I skate by them. I look at their faces. I look to see if anybody's cut, if anybody's got a scab, some scar tissue. That's part of my visual preparation. During the national anthem, and I've already seen all those faces, I'll close my eyes and I will visualize each infraction that I could possibly call. Slashing, tripping, hooking, holding. And I'd see the faces of the players that I've just looked at. So, and I would see a dive and a good non-call visually. So I've already called every possible penalty in my head. I've already looked at things that weren't 2-minute penalties. They were maybe a minute and a half, and it was a good non-call. And now I'm ready to drop the puck. I'm ready. I'm emotionally calm. I am visually prepared for the very first one that can happen, because if you miss the first one, you're swimming upstream. So that's how I prepared for it, and it seemed to work for. I fooled him for a lot of years.
So let's take it one step further, Kerry. So you've got supervisors that watch all your games and they critique you guys and so on and so forth, and just like anybody in a work job. So
Sure.
How soon before a controversial call takes place does somebody contact you to review it? And let's go to an extreme case like the Bertuzzi Moore situation. What would have happened in that instance for something as severe as that for the official and all the in-game and out-game officials?
You know, I'm going to give you a take, and this is no BS. I saw that developing, but I saw it develop a couple of games before. I saw Todd Bertuzzi, and players can give you sort of a tip that they're on a roll. This guy was a beast, and I got along great with Todd, and afterwards I have a lot of respect for him. That situation shouldn't have happened, but I knew it was inevitable, because the previous game he put his stick down on the back of somebody's neck behind the net. Mm-hmm. That I went, whoa. And he got a 2-minute penalty for it, but it was a bad play. And so that tells me that this guy's got some anger. He's playing, way beyond the edge, and he needed to be toned down a little bit. So in that particular situation, I think there could have been some intervention. He's chasing the guy up the ice more. He's goading him. He wants him to fight. There's no way it's going to happen. Somebody should have jumped in there. An ounce of prevention is, certainly could have avoided a whole bunch of bad issues. It affected Todd Bertuzzi for sure, as much as Mr. Moore, maybe not physically, but emotionally. And I told Todd one night in Calgary, and Mark Crawford was coaching Vancouver, and it was whenever there was a power play, Big Bert position in front of the net, and he would cross-check shove a D-man from behind out of the way as the shot was coming from the point. He screened, and then he would turn, and he had no D on him because he already eliminated him, and boom, in the net. So when he came on the ice in Calgary for that first power play, I said, Bert, I'm going to tell you, and here's the warning, and I mean it. If you cross-check push a D-man from behind and knock him down, you're going to get a penalty. Okay. Well, sure enough, that's what happened. Win the draw back to the point, clears the guy out, down on his nose, up goes my arm. Now he sees my arm up. Now he's pissed off. So he whacks another guy. And I went, boom, boom, that's another one. And now I blow the whistle, and he punched a guy in the face. That's the trifecta. He got 3. So he mouths off, and I gave him 10. He got 6 minutes in minors and a 10-minute misconduct. They scored 2 goals on the 2 minors, and he never played. Crawford benched him for the rest of the game. Now, the next night, it's a back-backer. I've got Vancouver and Edmonton. And Ricky, in the Northlands where all the visiting team would congregate, they kick the soccer ball around, they warm up. I'm wheeling my bag in, and the game stopped because Fraser's walking by Bertuzzi, and Bert's giving me the stink eye. And I went, hi, Bert. He just never said anything. He just stared at me. So I'm walking away, and I'm 15 feet away, and he goes, hey, Kerry, are we going for the quad tonight? I said, Bert, that's entirely up to you. I never had another issue with Todd Bertuzzi after that. When I said something, he knew I meant it. We never had another issue. It's about
what I was referring to is, Kerry, what would happen with the officials, like the supervisors, like after that? Like, would you have to report? You write a game report. So where I'm going is I want to take it one step further, because what I'm trying to pump your tires here, because how much work you guys do. That a game, the Yellow Jerseys game is an example from the Have Another Donut incident. You as an official have to be aware of everything going on around the league at all times. So it's not just game to game to game. You got to know everything, because these incidents can all flare up. So something like that developing, like the Bertuzzi incident I used, and then the Yellow Jerseys incident, it was probably a dark day for hockey, probably more embarrassing than anything, but maybe walk the listeners through that process and how it developed over a couple of games and led to that. And again, there was more officials involved than just one.
Well, when there's a situation like the Bertuzzi and Moore issue, the officials are up way into the wee hours writing reports, and everything has to be like, I started, my first president of the NHL was Clarence Campbell when I signed my first contract. And Mr. Campbell was a Nuremberg prosecutor for the Canadian Army. He was like Rhodes Scholar, lawyer. He wanted everything detailed, and you had to write it in hand, and you had to sign it, and you had to fax it in back then, had a game report. And so I was schooled in that process, and these guys would have been up hours writing reports to make sure, because whatever they submitted in their report would become evidence in the court of law. And they were. Each official had to go and be part of that process. So it's really serious stuff. And even now, as we move to appeal processes for players, if the referee's comments or his written report wasn't bang on, it could affect whether or not the player would serve a suspension or whether he would, in fact, be reinstated. So those kinds of things are crucial in how you look at it. Back then, we didn't have replays. We had to do it from recall. Fortunately, I've got a pretty good memory and a VCR for a brain, so I could replay that play in my head. It is important that fans know you don't. The work isn't done when the horn sounds at the end. You got paperwork to do.
That's right.
And it's the entirety of the job. You take it seriously. It's really important, and especially players. I wanted to protect the players. I think that was my most important job, was to provide them for safety, but also to protect themselves from themselves at times. And I remember in my final game with it was New York Rangers and Philadelphia Flyers tied for that last playoff spot. It was tied. It went into a shootout, but with less than a minute left, Daniel Cursillo was playing for the Flyers, and he got involved with Stahl, and I'm on the other side of the net as I stopped play, and I saw Cursillo. I just knew the wheels were spinning, the eyes were rolling, and he was going to punch Stahl. I did not want to have to call a penalty in a tie game with both teams' last playoff spot, and I blasted behind the net, and just as Cursillo had the left ready to throw it, I grabbed it by the bicep and I spun him. Now he thought I was another player, and he got the other hand. He was going to punch me, and he said, "Oh, you're lucky it was you." And I said, "No, you're lucky it was me. You were just going to take a penalty." I saved that player from taking a 2-minute stupid penalty with everything on the line for their season. They ended up Flyers winning the shootout, and they go to the Stanley Cup Finals that year and lose in 6 to the Chicago Blackhawks. So if fans think that the referees are just out there to, call the penalties, I wanted to avoid calling penalties wherever I could. The Tiger Williams situation, I wanted him not to take a penalty. I want him to play, and I want all the players to play.
We'll talk about the have another donut situation. For our young listeners that don't know that story, that's the one I wanted to get you to. The yellow jerseys day. That's a pretty wild story.
Well, I had the game before that one in Boston, and it was bedlam. I got punched out of the fight. John McClain hit me right between the eyes when I went in to help the linesman, Ron Finn. We had 2 fights going at one time, and I thought I could get there fast enough. McClain smoked me right between the eyes, and it made me awful mad. I ragdolled him and got him the penalty box. It's on YouTube. You can see it. But that was a tough game. Jim Schoenfeld was coaching, and he was. They had a very successful season that year. They came out of the Mickey Mouse sort of complaint that Wayne Gretzky made about the Jersey Devils. And they were poised. It wasn't too long after that they would challenge for and win the Stanley Cup. But the next night, as luck to have it, the Devils got spanked pretty good. And Jim Schoenfeld, being the fiery guy he is, he gathers around Don Koharski, and Koho slipped and off the mat and bumped into the wall. And then we heard all that stuff that was captured on tape about go have another donut, you fat pig. We had the very next game. Jim Schoenfeld was suspended by Brian O'Neill for 1 game. It was on a Sunday. That next game was going to happen. And a season's ticket holder for the New Jersey Devils, who happened to be a circuit court judge on Sunday, imposed an injunction on the suspension, and Shawnee was going to be behind the bench. Well, Dave Newell, God rest his soul, was the president of the NHL Officials Association and was assigned to work that game. And there was no way that Newley was going on the ice if Jim Schoenfeld was behind the bench. John Ziegler was off in England at the time, and the chairman of the board, Bill Wirtz, threw John McCauley, who was begging his friend Dave Newell to go and work the game. He was going to be fired. Mr. Wirtz had called and said, if these guys aren't on the ice, they're all fired. And Dave Newell stuck to his guns, and he wouldn't let the linesman on either. And they ended up over an hour of delay. They left the building, and the yellow jerseys came on, the off-ice crew, to referee the game. It was a black eye for sure. Now, I was in Detroit to do the West Conference game the next night, and I got a call from Bill Clement on ESPN, and he said, what's going to happen? And I said, I've already been in touch with our lawyer for the association, and we understand that the guys have been terminated, and we will not go on the ice tomorrow night in Detroit unless they're reinstated. They'll be having negotiations tomorrow. I didn't know until 5 o'clock for a 7:30 game, I got the clearance to go to the rink and referee that game. They had backup refs in place for that one as well.
That's
the
awesome.
Politics and the stuff behind. I mean, Tommy Wozniak, when he got 20 game suspension, that was another major incident. Major incident. And Ronnie Foyt was the linesman he tripped, and Foyt lasted a year or two after that, and he got terminated and I believe wrongfully, but it was a bit of a payback. You know, you have to pick your battles, and some of them, you know, when you're battling with the league, you're just not going to win.
Squid, we're running out of time
Kerry,
here, but we got a couple of things left. Kerry, give him one.
Yeah, one of the great things about the relationships that you build. I remember when I started coaching in the ECHL. Now, when you're a player, you can do something about the game. You can go out, you can hit someone, punch someone, do whatever it is. But when you're coaching, boy, I'll tell you, at the first, it was very, very difficult for me. I would be screaming at referees, waving my arms. So Andy Van Helleman was the head of officiating for the ECHL. He comes in, he sits down, he says, Rick, I want to talk to you. Okay. You know, so anyway, he says, I want you to do me a favor. He said, I don't want you screaming at the referees. I don't want you waving your arms and making them look bad. Put your hands in your pocket. Play with your nuts if you want, whatever you want to do. And then call the referee over and have a conversation with him. So I said, okay, I'll try that. So there's one night, Kerry Koharski, Don's younger brother. He's refereeing, and he makes 3 calls in a row against us. So I put my hands in my pocket, I call him over, and I can see him. He's like this, getting ready, and he goes, he doesn't want to talk to me. So he comes over, and I got my hands in my pocket, and I'm saying, talking to him, Coho, and how are things and everything. I said, by the way, I said, you should see that blonde over there by the penalty box. You got to go take a look at her. She's unbelievably looking. And so he goes to turn around. I said, don't turn around. She's going to see you turning around. So anyway, he goes. So I keep talking. And then finally I said, oh, and by the way, those were 3 horseshit calls. So he goes over to the penalty box and pretends he's talking to them in there to tell them something in the penalty box. Meanwhile, he turns around to me and he goes, ooh, because he looked at the girl I was talking about. We got three power plays in a row, like I think in the next 9 minutes. And after that, you know what? It was the best lesson I think I ever learned as a coach. And I got to thank Andy for that, because if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't have lasted as long as I did as a coach.
Well, see, and it also felt good that your hands were in your pocket. They were better in your pocket than they were your point finger.
Yeah.
You know, but that was a terrific lesson. And one of the things that I tried to do in the early 80s, I wanted to communicate with coaches at the bench, because if I left a message to a captain, quite oftentimes the message was, you know, he's a blah, blah, blah. It would never be communicated the way that I delivered it. So I thought Brian Murphy was a very emotional coach in Washington. He was standing on the boards, and you guys remember he had kind of the Daffy Duck kind of lisp and talk. And this particular game, he's on the bench, he's up on the boards, he's waving and flapping his arms. So I went over. Now, once the referee puts himself at the bench, you got to eat everything the coach is going to give you, because there's no way you could legitimately give him a bench penalty. But I used this open palm. I went, Brian, this means peace. I went, and a monotone voice, Brian, I'd love to have a conversation with you, but to do so, I need you to get off the boards and please calm down. Well, he came right down to my level. I said, now, you may not agree with what I'm going to tell you, but this is the reason I did to do whatever it was he was upset about. He thought for a minute. He went, well, Kerry, you're right about one thing. I don't agree with what you said, but thanks for coming over and talking to me. And from that moment on, a seed was planted, and we had a relationship that he knew I was approachable. I could control the conversation. If he did it respectfully, we have a convo. So that works. I mean, it really does. I'm not always right, for God's sake. We all know that. And I would be the first to admit if I missed. We got a fire drill. That's at my end. Nice, eh? What?
Yeah.
The horn just went, and the game is over, boys.
There we go. We are in overtime, actually. Hey, so Kerry, here I want to leave this one with you. You're talking about coaches, but talking to captains sometimes. Here's a story that at an event we had at our place one time, Ron Hogarth told us, and you may know this one. It was on Super Bowl Sunday, and the Pens were playing. So Mary approaches the face-off to Hoagie and says, listen, the lads want to watch the game today. Can you keep your whistle in the pocket so we can get it done quicker? And Hoagie looks at him. Are both teams on side with this? Can I count on you to keep everybody in line? You're not going to make me look bad, are you? And of course, it's, oh, yeah. So the first period was okay. A few borderlines go by. The second period starts off okay, but the intensity starts picking up, as you know, like the boys will. And pretty soon it starts getting a little bit out of hand, but the third period's going crazy. So he's looking at Mary all the time. Mary keeps looking away from him, won't look at him. So finally he goes over to the bench, as you said, and they're going to have a conversation. And he said, come on, Mary, I'll bring this game back. It's, now out of control. You promised me this was not going to happen. Mario looks at me and goes, don't look at me. It's your game. You deal with it. Now, have you ever had a situation like that happen to you with players?
Well, talk about Mario. That guy had hands like you can't believe. I dropped a puck at center ice one time, and he actually took his stick and saucered it and caught the puck in the air. Now, I didn't blow the whistle to stop the play. No, I did blow the whistle. I got the puck back in my hand. I didn't throw Mario out. I said, I'll bet you can't do that again. So I let the other centerman's looking like, what, you're going to let him have another one? So I did the hand fake. I was moving my hand all over the place, up, down, and then I dropped the puck. And he was like this. Boom. Caught it right on the stick blade. I let him go. Let him play on. If he could do that twice, he's got my puck. Amazing.
Well, listen, Kerry, I want to thank you so much for joining us. There's so much more we want to get into, and you've been a fantastic guest. Great story. Squid, any final commentary before we let him go?
No, just that, you know what? I thought that in my day, like I said, the referees and the linesmen were fantastic. They used to have conversations with us, and there'd be the odd time where we'd end up, after a game, going to a bar. Those guys would be in there. We'd sit down and have a beer with them and just have a good conversation. And I can't say enough about how good they were with us. And you know what? Everybody talks about how they make bad calls, if whatever. You know what? It's human error. I mean, we're all human. We all make mistakes. They made mistakes in their job. Hey, you don't think I didn't make a few mistakes when I was playing? Well, sure as hell did. So anyway, hats off to those guys, especially back then when it was a one-man referee situation as well.
I loved what I did, even on the tough days and the lonely days and the dog days of February. We just wanted to get it into the playoffs. I loved every day on the job. I loved being associated with the players and developing rapport with them. That's the thing I miss the most, guys, about not being on the ice. And I just did a championship game in a checking for charity, the pro final game. Johnny Gaudreau's on the ice, and they're all pretty much NHL D1 players. The pace was awesome. I felt like I'm in my environment again. It's muscle memory. I felt, I've lost a step, but I felt like I could compete. And so that's what I miss the most. I just absolutely love you guys. I mean that from my heart. And the relationships are what we remember the most. So thank you for having me.
So referees lose. So Kerry, referees lose a step too, you're saying that.
Right, Kerry, great having you. Love to have you come back on again at some point and do this again and just extend what we like to talk about. We want to thank you so much. Good luck moving forward, and we'll definitely be in touch. Thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it, and I hope the building's not burning down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you better get out there.
Thanks a lot, Kerry.
Thanks, Kerry.